you will know that over the last 2 years, there have been this sudden reawakening to the inevitability of, the need to widen the tax net. So we tried a number of schemes like the VADES that we did. FIRS also went on the offensive together with all of the state internal revenue services to chase out defaulters and paste stickers everywhere, reinvigorate their power to audit and use all sorts of means, including reaching out to banks and and agencies of government to collaborate with them to fulfill.
Yes, because I'm about to get into that one specifically, because I'm looking at the legal angles there. Do they have any backing by law to reach out to banks to just yank off money from people's accounts?
Well, they do have powers. But I think discussing the limit of that powers and how that power has been exercised is probably, a bigger debate that we can stretch as far as we want to. There are provisions in virtually all of the enabling tax legislation that empowers FIRS. The FIRS Establishment Act, the Companies Income Tax Act, the Personal Income Tax Act, all have provisions that empowers the tax authorities to appoint persons as its agent for the collection, for the collection of taxes. The FIRS Establishment Act uses the power of substitution. In the Companies Income Tax Act and in the Personal Income Tax Act, there are similar provisions which essentially says the revenue authorities can appoint any person, not actually just banks, any person who the tax authority thinks is holding resources or funds of a tax defaulter, to say, because this taxpayer hasn't regularized his position, it has an assessment that is due to be payable to me, I'm now authorizing you to take a lien on that funds and remit it to me for the purpose of defraying that liability. So that power exists within the legislation. However, the devil is in the details. So because before you approach the bank to say, Mr. A or taxpayer B is owing me certain money and I need you to remit that to me, it must have been established beyond reasonable doubt that that liability actually is due. So that assessment should have become what we call final and conclusive. But what we've seen in the implementation of that is a mixed bag of a whole lot of issues. There are instances where the tax in question is still in dispute, so maybe there's a tax audit that is ongoing, the cases hasn't been established. Some are based on assumption or perception that, look, based on the turnover in your, that goes on in your bank account, and just opposing that with the amount that you're paying, we think you're not paying the right amount of taxes. Now, when it gets stretched to that particular level, you then begin to imagine whether the limits of that power actually extend there. Has the liability been established?
All right, but I'm a very contentious issue here, but I would like you to speak to, from the feedback you're getting from people who are in there, what avenues are there for them to exercise their rights when they feel they've been, that the tax authorities have been a bit unjust in getting their revenues?
Yeah, so, I mean, even within that provision of what we call the power of substitution or ability of the tax authority to appoint agent, that same section, the immediate following subsection says this doesn't remove the power of the taxpayer to go through all the channels of tax dispute resolution, and all of that. So I think the first approach will be for the taxpayer to actually approach the tax authority in question. And I've seen different varieties of different kind of issues. Some based on the typical mix-up of issues that we have because of the level of documentation and the fact that some things are still very manual. Say for example, if an individual receives a letter from, say Lagos State Internal Revenue Services, for example, because the person is in here and say, I don't have any record that you're making any payment to Lagos State. Meanwhile, this individual is probably having his primary place of residence outside of Lagos State, for example. The process is still manual up until this time, and there may not be an established record for one state tax authority to immediately check into the database of the other to be sure that taxpayer is paying tax in the other state. So the first step I believe any taxpayer should take is to actually approach the tax authority in question, particularly if you have facts to substantiate that you're not actually in default. Right back to the FIRS to say, no, this can be true. This is evidence of my tax payment. This is evidence of my tax clearance. I can't possibly imagine why my taxes are, why any taxes is being held against me, and you'll be called for reconciliation. That perhaps is the first point.
All right, but what about the gray areas? Because I'm looking at things around, multiple taxation and things that are still being disputed.
that's still there with us. Multiplicity of taxes and levies, perhaps, is probably one of the major issues that businesses and taxpayers in Nigeria are grappling with. I don't even think it's so much of the rates or the quantum of the amount that have been paid, but the sheer number of taxes and levies and charges and different tax authorities that you're supposed to be answerable to, that can be very daunting. I mean, within the approved list of taxes that we have in Nigeria, there are probably, well, almost 60 different kind of taxes and levies that you're supposed to be paying. So if a business that is operating across multiple multiple states in the country, so you're going to be answerable to almost all of the state tax authorities in each of the states, with the FIRS, with local government revenue authorities and all of that. So I think it's probably one of the biggest headache that still needs to be fixed to simplify the burden of tax compliance in the country.
All right, so I'm now trying to look at the area of ease of paying taxes, because if it's one thing to ask people to pay taxes, another thing is if you're making it easy for them to comply with, with regulations. How would you rate Nigeria with the rest of, let's say, the continent?
We're not doing well, and we can do significantly better. However, I think we also need to give some measure of credit. If you look at where we were, say, 4 years, because the journey appears still very far, it's difficult for us to immediately give credit to the tax authority. Over the last 2 or 3 years, a whole lot of things have happened in terms of trying to automate the process. So, for example, the Federal Inland Revenue Services, a number of state internal revenue services, particularly Lagos State, Rivers State, have gone online with filing of annual returns of, whether at the individual level or FRS at the corporate level. So you can file your tax returns online, or at least a significant number of them. Portal now available for income tax, value-added tax, your monthly withholding. You can pay all of those taxes online, but the teething issue are still there with us, particularly at the federal level. I know that when the FIRS rolled out the online filing portal last year, they even insisted that you can't come to our offices with paper filing because we need everybody to go to the portal. But that's not the case at the moment, because the teething issue we're having with the portal are still there with us, and now we are, in a way, almost resorting back to manual submission. So I think we're making some progress, but the measure of progress vis-a-vis the quantum of challenges and how fast and how far we need to go, we're not moving as good as we should.
All right.